Hello, how's it going? So this is just a little video about the mini ADSR which went up yesterday. It's the mini ADSR. Basically what it is, it's like a bread and butter ADSR panel and PCB, as well as the chip which it is based on. It's based on an Electric Druid Gen 8C chip. Basically I had this on the breadboard already because I was making a polyphonic envelope generator for the Game Boy Mega Machine. This was quite a while back. This was about 4 or 5 months ago, and yeah, and it just made sense to use this because it makes the actual envelope generator quite a lot simpler to make, and it's pretty damn good. I've had experiences with these chips in the past. For instance, Frequency Central used to use these, and I built a couple of the Eurorack ones when I was using Eurorack synths, which I don't really use anymore. So I sold those on a few years ago. So in the Kosmo 2.0 like touring synth, I used to have two modules that were basically two Music from Outer Space dual ADSR envelope generators that were in here, and sadly they were one of the first modules that I built, and they were really unreliable and they kept on breaking basically. So I had to quickly kind of think of a new plan, as they were the problem point in the synth on the last few tours. So just before the October tour, like I said, I started designing PCB modules for all of the modules, and by then I had the oscillators finished, I had the filters finished, and I also had the envelope generators finished. And finally the envelope generators are now out as of yesterday, and basically they're in here. You can see it. These ones haven't actually moved since that tour, and they didn't pose any problems at all. In fact, they were a lot better for my needs than what was in there originally. So first off, a quick chat about the assembly. The assembly is reasonably similar to building the filter as well as the LFO. It's based on those Molex connectors that connect to the big jacks. This is a green module. This is one of the first ones. It's green, but yeah, you can see it's basically with Molex connectors. Yeah, I did this because then there's you have more versatility of what you want to use for the jacks. You don't need to have the exact right jacks. They can be pretty much anything as long as they're big jacks, and they can work with these designs. So the bill of materials and everything is up on the website right now, and yeah, it's a pretty damn quick build. Like, you can build this in about probably 30 minutes. And because the Gen 8C kind of encapsulates most of the envelope generators functions, all you need to worry about is the output, the input, and a bit of power filtering. So as you can see, it's a very simple design. So you'll notice there's a heck of a lot of decoupling capacitors. To be honest, you could skip these. If you don't have any sitting around, then just skip them. In fact, I've skipped them on these, and as you can see here, I've skipped them on these. There's no capacitors on there, and it pretty much functions exactly the same because you have these big chunky 10 UF capacitors on the power. The rest of them don't really make much of a difference, but I've kept them in there for people who want to just go that little extra mile. But on the actual PCB board that is actually out on the shop, they have lines through the ones that you can skip if you're feeling risky. Another thing to note is the switches. The bottom switch is basically an on, off, on. As you can see, it latches, so you've got on, off, on, and this is the mode switch. Basically, we'll talk about it in a little minute, but basically it's an ADSR, and then in the middle it is basically a looping ADSR, but only when you put the trigger on. So when you send a trigger in, it starts looping and just loops around. I'll show you how that works. And then the top is a looping ADSR, so it just loops around sort of like an LFO. The switch on the top, however, is a momentary switch this way, so when you push it down, it just goes back up. This is so you can trigger it with your fingers. You could just trigger it whenever you want, just to check, but then if you flick it upwards, it latches. This is an on, off, and then in brackets on. In brackets means that it's a momentary, but this is like a bit of both. You can momentarily trigger it, but then if you flick it up, you latch it on, and I'll show you what that means in a second. But a quick thing to note about this switch is if you're struggling to find this specific switch, well, you can get away with momentary on both sides, which means it looks like a brackets on, off, brackets on, which means they're momentary on both sides. That itself has a different advantage. Basically, you can trigger it really quickly by going like that. So if you're struggling to find a momentary latching switch, then not to fear. So now that's covered, let's look at it working. So behind this mangle of wires is actually the envelope generator. It is sitting right here. You can see it looking snazzy, but it's a bit hidden. I'm just going to undo this, make it a little bit more visible. So here's the actual envelope generator. It is being triggered by a MIDI to CV converter out there. There is actually a MIDI to CV converter coming reasonably soon to the Kosmo kind of synthesizer thingamajiggy. But if you see here, I'm playing with a B-Step Pro right now, but you can see there's two LEDs. Basically the first one is the input, that's the gate. It basically just shows you the gate, and then the bottom one shows you what is actually being outputted from the ADSR. So right now it is just but you can see that one turns off when I pull my finger off, and this one turns off when the actual envelope generator finishes. Likewise, if I make a long attack, this will turn on quicker than this one. Likewise, you can actually trigger it with this. So it goes attack, decay, sustain, release, and time. Basically time means you can adjust the timing of this whole thing overall. So you've got this. But if you just want to adjust the whole thing, you adjust the time duration knob at the bottom. So if I adjust the time overall, soften the start off a bit. The reason why I have this latching so I can latch it on is what I do is I flick it up, it's latched on. As you can see, the gate is constantly on. Now if you turn up the sustain, it just becomes a voltage output. This outputs up to 8 volts. So you can have any set voltage in between 0 and 8 volts. It's just another kind of voltage that's sitting around. If you haven't got a fixed voltage coming from anywhere, it's useful to have something like this. That's all it is, basically. So if you flick this bottom one right up to loop, it loops. It just loops, and you change the duration. So that's literally the actual module looping. And you can actually, if you leave it, if you put this in the middle, when you actually send a gate into it, then it starts looping. So I'm going to send a gate into it and it'll just start looping then. Like, see what I mean? And you can speed it up a bit. So there's not really much more to say about it. It's basically a simple ADSR that just does what it's supposed to do. It does what it says on the tin, and it's a nice little one to go with the filters and the oscillators and the LFOs. So that is the mini ADSR. It's just a super simple ADSR. There will be a more complicated one coming in time. However, right now I'm trying to just get all of the performance parts and aspects of the synth working well and sharing my findings with you all. But to be honest, a good ADSR kind of just does what it says on the tin. And basically that is what this thing does. It's an ADSR with a few added functions, but really it's just a functional ADSR. How many times can you say ADSR? ADSR. This one, if you look around enough, you can probably get all of the extra parts on top of this for around a tenner, and you can definitely build it in under an hour. Because as you can see, the part count is pretty damn low. The next one's coming out of VCAs, and then finally the synth voice will be done, but we'll talk about these in the coming weeks. But yeah, this was just a video to kind of cover the basics of what this module is, and yeah, it's now on the shop if you're interested, and information and schematics are available over on my website. Also, another thing that went up yesterday is probably, finally, I always wanted this as a t-shirt, and now I've got it as a t-shirt. I'm not going to get out of this t-shirt anymore, but these are on the shop as well. And if you haven't already seen it, Desperado Vespa, my next single is out now, so go and check it. The link is in the description for that. But yeah, I could blab forever. I'm going to go and get on with some other projects, and I'll see you next time. Anyway, bye bye bye.